All right, let's talk about something we all do every second of every day, breathing. But what if I told you there's an invisible enemy in the very air we're breathing right now? No, this isn't science fiction. This is the reality of air pollution. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and make this invisible threat visible. Okay, let's kick things off with a single number, 99%. What's that? Well, according to the World Health Organization, that's the percentage of people on Earth breathing air that's considered unsafe. Let that sink in. 99%. We're talking about pretty much every single person on the planet. This isn't a localized problem. It's a global crisis, for sure. So that number, 99%, it's huge. And it leads to a really basic question, right? What are we actually breathing in? When we say air pollution, what are we talking about? It's not just one thing. It's this complex, invisible cocktail. So let's break it down.
All right, first things first. We gotta understand, air pollution isn't a single substance. It's this constantly changing, reactive mix of all sorts of gases and tiny particles. You can almost think of the atmosphere as this giant chemical reactor, constantly cooking up new stuff. Okay, so it's not as simple as what comes directly out of a car's tailpipe or a factory smokestack. Those are what we call primary pollutants. But here's where it gets tricky. The real danger often comes from what happens after they're released. You see, when these primary pollutants get up into the atmosphere, the sunlight, it basically cooks them. And that chemical reaction creates a whole new set of nasty stuff called secondary pollutants. The hazy smog you see over cities, that's a perfect example, ground-level ozone. And that's exactly why smog can be way worse in the afternoon, long after the morning commute that pumped out the initial ingredients. So let's get a bit more specific. Let's talk about something called particulate matter, or PM for short. Now, with PM, size is everything. It completely changes how dangerous it is. First up, we've got the biggest ones, PM10. These are what we'd call coarse particles. Think of things like dust or pollen or mold. They're big enough that, thankfully, your body's built-in filters, your nose and throat, can catch most of them. But now, let's zoom way in. This right here, this is PM 2.5. And honestly, it's a total game changer. We're talking about particles so fine, they're about 40 times smaller than a single grain of sand. They come from combustion, from burning things. So the fuel in your car, coal in the power plant, wildfires, you name it. And because they're just so tiny, they can sneak right past your body's defenses. They get deep, deep into your lungs. And from there, they can slip right into your bloodstream. And then we get to what you could call the final boss, ultra-fine particles, or UFPs. These things are so ridiculously small, they basically behave like a gas. I love this analogy. If PM10 is like a beach ball and PM25 is a golf ball, then an UFP is like a single speck of dust. Just minuscule. They're so tiny they can go from your lungs into your blood, and there's even evidence they can cross the blood-brain barrier. So the main takeaway here, the thing to really remember, is super simple. The smaller the particle, the deeper and more dangerous the invasion. Okay, so now we know what we're dealing with, these different-sized particles. But the next logical question is, where is all this stuff coming from? And the answer isn't as obvious as just pointing a finger at a factory smokestack. Some of the biggest sources, they're probably going to surprise you. So this chart breaks it down pretty clearly for the US. And wow, look at that. More than half of all our man-made air pollution comes from transportation. We're talking cars, trucks, planes, you name it. The very machines that get us from A to B are the single biggest problem. But take a closer look at that smaller slice of the pie. That's right, agriculture. This is the one that so often flies under the radar. So what happens is ammonia, which comes from fertilizers and animal manure, gets into the air. And up there, it becomes a key ingredient. It reacts with all the other stuff from cars and factories to form that super dangerous secondary PM 2.5 we talked about earlier. And here's the kicker. It's a massive contributor to the problem, but it's still largely unregulated. Okay, and just when you thought it couldn't get more complicated, it does. See, it's not just about what we're pumping into the atmosphere anymore. Our changing climate is now actively working against us. It's creating this really dangerous feedback loop, a vicious cycle that's making the whole problem even worse.
Yeah, there's actually a name for it, the climate penalty. And it's a pretty simple idea, really. Just think of heat as an accelerator. The hotter it gets, the faster those chemical reactions happen in the atmosphere, the ones that cook up pollution like ground-level ozone. So, as the planet warms up, it literally becomes more efficient at creating smog, which means our air quality can get worse, even if we don't emit a single extra puff of pollution.
And you can see the cycle laid out right here. It's pretty straightforward and pretty scary. Step 1, the climate warms. Step 2, that leads to more wildfires and intense heat waves. Step 3, those events create way more smoke and ground-level ozone. And step 4, our air quality gets worse. And we have to talk about wildfires for a sec. The smoke they pump out is a massive source of PM 2.5. Get this. Some studies show that wildfire smoke can be up to 10 times more toxic than regular city pollution. Why? Because it's not just burning wood. It's burning everything. Plastics, metals, all the stuff in our homes.
Okay, so we've covered what's in the air and where it comes from. Now for the really personal part. What happens when this invisible stuff actually gets inside of us? Let's follow the path of these pollutants as they invade the human body.
Well, the damage pretty much happens in 3 main ways. First, there's something called oxidative stress. Basically, the pollutants irritate your lungs, and that triggers this chain reaction, inflammation all over your body, which can even lead to hardened arteries. Second, it messes with your nervous system, throwing your heart rate and blood pressure all out of whack. And third, and this is maybe the scariest, is direct translocation. That's when those ultrafine particles we mentioned literally travel through your bloodstream and start causing direct damage to your heart, your liver, and yeah, even your brain. And the results of this invasion? They're devastating, and they affect your entire body. You know, we tend to think of air pollution as just a lung problem, right? Like asthma or COPD. But the truth is so much bigger and so much scarier than that. Remember those tiny particles that get into your blood? Well, this is what they do. Between 40 and 80%, let me say that again, 40 to 80% of deaths from air pollution are from heart attacks and strokes. It's a full-on systemic assault linked to neurological problems like dementia and even reproductive issues like low birth weight. Okay, I know that was a whole lot of bad news. It's pretty bleak. But the story absolutely does not end there. The good news is we know what the problem is, and we actually have a ton of solutions to fight back. So let's pivot. Let's talk about how we clear the air. But first, before we dive into the solutions, let's talk about motivation. How about this number? $2.9 trillion. That's the estimated global cost of air pollution from just fossil fuels every single year. We're talking healthcare bills, lost workdays, the whole shebang. That's over 3% of the entire global GDP. So, cleaning the air, it's not just about our health, it's a massive economic imperative too. When it comes to solutions, they really come from 2 different directions, top down and bottom up. From the top, you've got the big stuff, government action, international treaties. A great example is the Gothenburg Protocol in Europe, which has been wildly successful, cutting some key pollutants by as much as 80%. But then you have the bottom-up approach. This is all about community power, people using new, cheap sensor technology to monitor the air in their own neighborhoods and then push for local change. And here is just a brilliant example of an innovative local solution. In Barcelona, they came up with something called Superblocks. It's so clever. They take a 3x3 grid of city blocks, and they basically restrict most of the car traffic to the outside roads. Then they reclaim all those internal streets and turn them into parks and pedestrian zones. And the results? They speak for themselves. Huge drops in pollution, more green space, and a healthier, happier community. And if you're wondering if big national-level change can actually happen and happen fast, just look at China. Back in 2013, they had a major pollution crisis and declared a literal war on pollution. And the results have been nothing short of staggering. In just 8 years, they cut national PM 2.5 exposure by over 40%. It's just incredible proof that when a government gets serious with focused policy and real investment, you can clean the air way faster than anyone thought was possible. So all of this leaves us with one final really big question. We've seen how this stuff is made, where it comes from, how it literally attacks our bodies from the inside out. And we've also seen that solutions are totally possible. So we have to ask, is clean air a luxury, something only for those who can afford it? Or is the ability to just breathe a fundamental human right for every single person on this planet? That's the real question, isn't it?